I'm here visiting Stirling Castle, one of the most important and greatest stone castles in Scotland. The castle was not only a fortress, but a royal palace as well. In fact, several kings and queens were crowned here, including the most famous of them all, Mary, Queen of Scots, in 1542. The castle was lived in by so many monarchs, and they then enlarged it, adapted it, embellished it in order to provide security, comfort, and a little bit of pleasure. And due to its strategic location, it was the most besieged castle in the land. When I married into the British aristocracy, it was the start of a wonderfully exciting journey, but it was also a little daunting. I became a viscountess, and for an American girl from a small town outside Chicago, that was quite a shock.
I live with my husband Luke, heir to the Earl of Sandwich, and our family at Mapperton House in Dorset.
Living in a place like this is a joy, but also a challenge. And every day we're aware that we're preserving a very special part of Britain's heritage. Mapperton has opened up an extraordinary new world for me, and I can't wait to share it with you all.
So if you love castles and manors and stately homes as much as I do, please join this American Viscountess as I journey into the British countryside in search of some of Britain's finest historic houses.
Oh my goodness. I'm literally stepping into 1,000 years of history. This is astonishing, and it's so ornate. Hello.
Hi.
I'm Julie.
Julie, welcome to Stirling Castle. I'm Ross.
Hi, Ross. Nice to meet you. And you're dressed the part.
That's it.
You are Scottish.
I am indeed.
I'm at Stirling Castle.
The finest
This is
one in
perfect.
Scotland. Oh, it's a glorious castle here at Stirling. I'm biased, of course, but I would say it was the finest one in this entire kingdom. This is the stage upon which Scotland's kings and queens performed from the 1100s, really right down to the present day. Stirling Castle is crucial to our nation's story.
It's incredible because, of course, it was built as a fortress, and then it evolved to become this royal palace.
That's it. The early years were very much a fortress. We command the crossing over the River Forth.
Right.
Stirling Bridge is just down below the castle. So if you hold the castle, you can control whoever's crossing over the bridge.
So tell me a little bit about the architectural history here, because this is such an ornate building.
Yes, the royal structures that we have today are largely 16th century, built by the Stuart kings.
Okay.
So the oldest building left is 1381, built for King Robert II, the first of the Stuart dynasty. And it was his descendants that went on to give us the glorious structures we have here today. We've got eclectic architectural styles. The Great Hall is England, the Gatehouse is France, and the Chapel Royal is Italy.
They traveled and they saw these places and they thought, I want to bring a little bit of Italy or France.
Scotland was
back
no remote
home.
realm. We were a fully integrated European nation. We wanted to be European players. So anything that was happening in the continent of Europe, our monarchy wanted to ensure it was at their court also, whether it be music, food, dance, fashion, architecture, art.
And there's buildings sort of scattered about, and that's of course what you would expect at such a grand castle, and that was really to defend, is that right?
Oh, very much so. The outer parts of the castle, it's all a fortress.
Yeah.
It's all gun batteries and gateways and fortifications. It's not until you move further up the castle rock you begin to see the royal splendour. But in the outer parts, this is very much built for war. And there's been many battles around the castle's walls. William Wallace at the Battle of Stirling Bridge 1297, Robert Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn 1314, to name just two. But not only have there been battles around the castle, this whole place has been attacked many times as well. Most famously, 1304, Edward I of England is outside.
Yep.
Inside, there's 140 Scots under Sir William Oliphant, and Edward has 17 trebuchets, you know, those massive catapults, hurling stone balls and Greek fire against the lads. 3 months they hold out for, between April and July of 1304. Eventually they have to surrender. Probably the most dramatic siege in the castle's history.
Oh my goodness.
There's been a lot of fighting.
Yeah, a lot of fighting, and of course one of many of these battles that have happened here. And because this is a great point, isn't it? I mean, a defensive point. I mean, it was built here for a reason.
It's the geographical position that makes Stirling important. We're right at the heart of Scotland. The River Forth used to cut Scotland in two almost, north and south. And here at Stirling we had the lowest crossing point over the river. So that's why the Scots monarchs built this castle, to guard that crossing, and inevitably it means that whenever there was warfare in Scotland, armies would funnel down the Forth Valley. This is where they would meet, and that's why you get some of the major battles and sieges in this area.
So when did it evolve, though, from being a fortress to then becoming a royal palace?
It's always used as a royal residence, but in terms of the palace and the monarchs being more confident and less concerned with warfare, you're probably moving into the later 15th century and the reign of King James IV. He is building certainly foreworks and fortifications, but they're really more for show than for practicality.
When that comes to be, because we want to show off our power and wealth.
It's all about the age of chivalry, swirling turrets and such like. The king no longer fears aggression.
Right.
He is confident. He does not think he can be attacked within his own realm, and therefore fortification is less important than architectural splendour, palaces, chapels, residences.
Right. And so then it begins sort of after
James IV to James V. From that point onwards we start to see the castle taking on more prominence as a residence than a fortress. Although later in history we do revert to it with Cromwell coming and attacking the castle in 1651, the Jacobite period after the overthrow of James VII in 1680. The castle's then involved in that. That's why the defences at the front of the citadel today, they're all early 18th century to keep the Jacobites out. So that the pendulum does swing back towards fortification. But in that late 15th century into the 16th century, this was all about the monarchs showing off their power, their wealth and their splendour with pleasure palaces.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is, of course, this looks so much different. You walk in and you think, what is this building?
It looks very odd. This is our Great Hall, and although it looks modern, this is actually one of our older structures.
Right.
It's built between 1497 and 1503. The Great Hall has recently been refurbished. And when Historic Scotland were refurbishing it in the latter part of the 20th century, we didn't just restore the interior, we also restored the exterior. So how you see this today, covered with lime wash, the shade known as King's Gold, this is exactly how the hall looked in the early 16th century once the hall had been completed for James IV. Most royal buildings in Scotland at that time were brightly coloured. In fact, even the palace, later this is done for James V, James IV's son, circa 1538 to 42. This would have been harled and lime washed as well. All these statues, golds, reds, pinks, purples, blues, greens. There was nothing grey and drab at the court. Nothing grey and drab. It was all about splendour and show, display.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, can we head in there?
Of course.
Oh, and this is the Great Hall.
This is the Great Hall, the largest and most magnificent one ever built in Scotland.
No.
Up the stairs. And
it's enormous then.
It's a huge ceremonial space. Really impressive.
Fantastic.
Hello, dear viewers. Are you passionate about history and stately homes as much as I am? Then sign up for the American Viscountess newsletter. Here you'll get exclusive insider stories from my latest visits to castles, manors, and stately homes, and stay updated on all the exciting projects at Mapperton. You'll also get access to all of my blogs, like the recent Legendary Balls of British High Society. So don't miss out, subscribe today, and join our wonderful community of heritage enthusiasts.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is the biggest and the best Great Hall of all time, is that right?
The largest, most magnificent medieval hall ever built in Scotland.
It's astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing. Now, tell me a little bit about the construction of this, when it was finished, and kind of what happened here when it was a royal palace.
King James IV, our great Renaissance king, he commissions the Great Hall. So he builds this between roughly 1497 and 1503. And this is used for all the state and ceremonial occasions. Parliament meets in here, royal banquets and festivities are held in here.
Right.
Most famously, Mary, Queen of Scots. She used this hall for a 3-day party in December 1566 to celebrate the baptism of her son, the future King James VI.
Again, you know, the kings and queens who were here, it was an opportunity for people to also come and greet them and meet them.
Yes, more of a ceremonial space for partying, for banquets, for parliaments.
Right.
When you're getting audiences with the king, you tend to find that in the royal apartments within, for example, the King's Inner Hall and the King's House, or in the palace block. But in here, this is where the king is very much on stage.
Right.
Again, another famous celebration is James VI.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about that.
He uses this hall on the 30th of August 1594 to celebrate the baptism of his son and intended heir, a wee boy called Prince Henry. He would have been King Henry IX of England.
Okay,
Alas, he died when he was aged 18 and never ascended the throne. He was born in the castle, here in the palace, baptised in the Chapel Royal, 30th of August 1594.
Right.
And the festivities for that baptism are here. But the high point is when a ship, 12 metres long, 18 high, is dragged into the hall. And on the decks of the ship, a ship, they're serving foodstuffs to the guests. As it gets to the top of the hall, it then reverses, and upon the decks of the ship there are 36 brass cannons. As it's withdrawing, each cannon looses off a round. Much is said to the consternation of some of the guests. The smoke was everywhere, so they say.
Incredible. So it was a celebration party, incredible. And that was kind of before they had fireworks, I guess?
Well, no, we actually have an earlier celebration in here. The very first fireworks display ever witnessed in Scotland. Because I mentioned Mary's festivities in 1566.
Yes.
Well, the last night of the celebrations, the 19th of December, 1566, Mary leads all of her guests from the Great Hall down to the front of the castle.
Yeah.
And there she puts on the very first fireworks display ever seen in Scotland. The whole 3-day festival was referred to as Queen Mary's Triumph.
Oh my goodness. So we can really thank Queen Mary for bringing fireworks to Scotland,
Certainly
is that right?
In Scotland, yes.
It sounds much better than Guy Fawkes, November 5th in England, don't you think so?
Well, it's quite spectacular, but of course both are linked into James VI because fireworks at night, Guy Fawkes in England.
Yeah.
The gunpowder plot affecting James VI. And the very first fireworks display here is at James VI's baptism. So his life is inextricably linked
to
with
fireworks. Brilliant.
Shall we go out into the inner close, the royal heart of the castle?
Yes, you lead the way.
This way.
Okay, what are we looking for next?
Well, we're in the royal heart of Stirling Castle now. Around us we've got arguably the finest collection of royal buildings that you'll find anywhere in Scotland. And in fact, we're standing on a very historic site here. These cobblestones that you see, marking out straight lines in the courtyard, well, these mark out the foundations of a building which once stood on this site. And almost certainly, these have been the foundations of the Chapel of St Michael.
Okay.
The old Chapel of St Michael stood here from 1412 until 1594. And this was the chapel in which James V was crowned.
No.
King of Scots.
Right here.
Right here, 21st September 1513. It was also the chapel where the infant Mary Stuart was crowned Mary, Queen of Scots, on the 9th of September 1543.
Oh my goodness. So Mary, Queen of Scots was crowned here.
9 months old.
Oh.
In fact, she's said to have been so small that Cardinal Beaton had to hold the crown above her head throughout the entire ceremony, and she cried all the way through it. But this is where Mary was crowned.
It's fantastic. So what happened though to the chapel?
Well, Mary's son, in fact, he's linked to this chapel too.
Okay.
Because when Mary's an adult, she uses this chapel for her son, the future James VI's baptism. He's baptised here, 17th December 1566.
The party happens
the
in there.
party in the Great Hall.
Yep.
But when James VI attains adulthood, he decides that he will demolish this chapel and he will replace it with a new one. And it's done for a specific reason. We mentioned again another party in the hall, Prince Henry and the ship.
The heir was born.
That's it. His heir was born in the palace, 19th February 1594. And by that time, by all accounts, the old chapel at the castle had fallen into a state of disrepair. So James VI decides...
He says, I'm going to level it.
That's it. And we'll build a more impressive chapel for Prince Henry's baptism.
This is where Henry was baptized.
Well, that's it. This is where he was baptised, 30th of August 1594.
Wow, I mean, it's enormous. To think that King James VI built this in how many months?
6 months.
I mean, it's vast. So tell me a little bit about the frieze. Is this original?
Do you know, the frieze is a wee bit later. It has been restored, but it was originally painted in 1629 for Prince Henry's younger brother, King Charles I.
Oh my goodness.
Because Henry dies when he's 18.
That's right.
So it means that when James VI passes in 1625, it's the younger son, Charles, who becomes king. And in anticipation of Charles coming north for his Scottish coronation, there was some work done at the castle, including this frieze. And you can see the royal cipher to the left, the letter I and the number 6, the I's from the name James, the R for rakes, meaning king, and then from left to right we have the sword, right to left the sceptre, and in between the crown. These show the Scottish crown jewels, or as they're known here, the honours of Scotland. And of course the actual honours of Scotland can be seen in the crown room at Edinburgh Castle.
That's right. I mean, it's incredible. Now tell me a little bit about this modern ceiling.
The chapel does look pretty modern now. And it gets us back to the period when the castle was occupied by the army. Because when the army were here, you know, from late 18th century to later 20th century, they used all the buildings for their own purposes.
Of course.
For example, in 1911, in this chapel royal, were a schoolroom, a storeroom, a dining room, plus an attic space.
There's another floor?
Aye, another level in here. And it wasn't until the 1930s that all those partitions were taken away. In fact, that was when we found the original frieze underneath all the army's work. But the chapel has been restored subsequently. It was hoped that we would restore it in the 1930s, but then the Second World War intervenes. There was a wee bit of work done in the 1950s, but the bulk of what we see here today was done by Historic Scotland in the mid-1990s. We put in a new floor, a new heating system, and we installed this new roof as well.
Right.
And this is the style of roof that you would have seen here in the 1590s. Although we do know from the 1628 Master of Works accounts, the original roof was decorated with blue and white motifs and such like.
The other thing I wanted to ask about with the windows here. Are these the original windows?
No, as with the roof and such like, these were put in the mid-1990s as part of the refurbishment. But they're the same style of windows that would have been here. However, if we look at the frieze to the west end, you can see Valentine Jenkins has painted a fake window.
Right.
And if you look at the style of the windows here and compare it to the windows that we've put in, slightly different.
Right, those have diamond panes.
That's it. I'll wager in 1629 when this was painted, that's how all the windows would have looked.
That's how, and that's a great window over there. I'm imagining it with diamond panes. But further on, is that the location of where the baptism happened?
It was. The baptism would have taken place down at the Holy Table.
Ooh, at the Holy Table?
The Holy Table. The King himself, James VI, he sat down here at the northeast corner of the chapel, underneath a canopy, and we had the ambassadors from England, from Denmark, from Mecklenburg, etc., all sitting here as young Prince Henry was baptised.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ross. Well, where off to next?
Well, I think we should make our way back out into the royal heart of the castle and across perhaps to the palace to see the royal apartments.
Absolutely. Let's go to those royal apartments. So we're heading to the royal apartments.
Yes.
And they are in this building here?
This is it. This is what we call the palace.
Okay.
Built for King James V.
So tell me a little bit about the architectural history here, because this is quite an ornate palace.
It's a small piece of France that's just been laid down in the heart of Scotland.
So James V built this?
He does. He builds this palace roughly 1538 to 1542. And it's influenced by the trip that he made to France, 1536 to 37. The King of Scots is blown away by what he sees.
Right.
So when he gets back to Scotland, he tries to recreate that French Renaissance style here with his architecture. So it's often said that a lot of the statuary and carving that we see in the facades are said to be similar to the type of statuary and carving that we would find, for example, on the Louis XII wing at the French Royal Palace of Blois. Now, the one to the furthest on the left looking down upon us, That is a statue of King James V himself. He's given away by the feature above his head, a Scottish lion.
Oh.
And in its paws, the lion clutches a tablet which bears the king's cipher, a letter I and a number 5. And then just above that tablet, we see the king's enclosed imperial crown. So there he is, James
There he
V.
is. And he's sort of looking outwards.
Right into
and
his
saying,
royal court,
welcome
yeah.
to my
Very much
royal
so.
palace and my royal court. We are now entering the royal apartments, is that right?
This here, this is the original entrance of the palace. Wow. And this is the original door.
No.
Yep. That door
Date
has
that
been
for
there
me.
Circa 1540. And therefore it means
Oh my goodness.
that this was the very door that was pulled open on the 9th of September 1543 to allow the infant Mary Stuart to be carried from the Queen's apartments through this doorway and across to the Chapel Royal, where the crown of Scotland was placed upon her head, and she was transformed from an infant child to the Lord's anointed as Mary, Queen of Scots.
Right.
This very door was here that day.
And she was screaming the whole time, is that right?
She did it at her coronation. Yeah.
It's incredible just to think that Mary, Queen of Scots, I mean, definitely, you know, her hand touched this.
Yep, she would have opened that
She
door
would have opened
as
it.
a child and as an
Of
adult.
course. So it survived.
Still here, all these years later.
Wow, it's incredible. It's incredible, considering, of course, the amount of fires, you know, that these palaces we know and historic houses have, but this has survived.
There's been major refurbishment works done in the palace. The army changed all this as well. But
Yes.
some of the doors have survived, and this is one of them, thankfully.
Thankfully, that's right. Incredible, incredible. All right, so which way?
I think we'll go along the West Gallery
Okay.
to the Queen's apartments.
Oh, fantastic.
We'll begin there.
So what room is this in the apartments?
We're now in the Queen's side of the palace. This is the Queen's outer hall. It's a waiting room. If you're coming to the castle to seek an audience with the Queen of Scots, you're given admittance to this space, and this is where you wait until the Queen is ready to receive you.
Oh my goodness, so I've also noticed I am. Now, I is of course Latin for James.
Jacobus.
M.
The M is for
Mary.
Maria.
Oh,
Mary
Maria.
of Guise. And you can see that the I and the M are linked together with a love knot. So it denotes a married couple,
Okay.
James and Mary.
This is obviously not original, but there's been some restoration.
That's exactly it. Again, when the army were here at the castle, they changed the palace apartments too. But between 2007 and 2011, Historic Scotland spent £12 million recreating these apartments. We see these rooms as they would have looked in the 1540s when Mary of Guise is here at the castle, bringing up her young daughter, Mary, Queen of Scots.
Oh my goodness, incredible.
This is now Queen's Inner Hall.
Queen's Inner Hall.
This is where you met the Queen of Scots.
Oh, so this, oh my goodness. So you're waiting out there to be called in, you get called in, and there is the Queen.
You can see the throne, and if we're talking the 1540s, the Queen to which we refer is Mary of Guise, James V's second French bride, the mother of Mary, Queen of Scots. And therefore it is Mary of Guise arms that are emblazoned on the cloth of estate above her throne.
And this carpet here, am I allowed to step on it? No.
Well, you're special, so you can. They were known at the Scottish court as turkey rugs. Really, really expensive, very prestigious. So only the most important people in the room were ever permitted to stand upon the rugs and the floor.
Wow.
The
So if
turkey
I'm
rugs.
coming in from the outer hall and I want to ask a question or complain
That's it.
or whatever it might be, I cannot stand onto this rug. I would be speaking to the Queen at this distance.
Unless invited to do so. And if the Queen did invite you to do so, it was a sign of favour. A great compliment to you.
Then would I have to get on my knees?
Well, it just depends what your relationship with the Queen
Curtsy?
is. Oh, you'd have to show respect.
I'd have to.
You'd have to show respect.
Right.
Because this is the room in which the Queen of Scots is very much on public display. This is where she welcomes foreign ambassadors to the Scottish court. When the Queen wishes to be more private, she would withdraw from an inner hall and she would make her way next door into her bedchamber. And if you were especially favoured, you would get an invitation in there also.
Really?
Yes.
In her bedchamber?
Into her bedchamber. Through there, you can have the private ear of the Queen of Scots.
Right. So, would she then say to me, let's have a private chat.
That could be the scenario.
That's right. Oh, goodness. And that's where she slept.
Well, there is a theory that she may not have slept in the bedchamber, but I think she probably did. But we can pick up on that next door.
Okay.
This is the smallest of the Queen's apartments. You'll have noticed as we've moved from the outer hall to the inner hall to the bedchamber, the rooms are becoming progressively more smaller, but they're also becoming progressively more important.
Okay.
So this is the most important room. To get access into this space,
Well, it's her bedchamber.
that's
of
a
course.
real sign of favour.
Yes.
You're doing very well if you get in here.
Okay, and I've noticed just around the frieze in particular, you've got MR.
Maria Regina, Mary of Guise, Queen Mary. The room today is presented as it would have looked when Mary of Guise was here in the 1540s. So much of what we see here now is modern recreation. It was done as part of Historic Scotland's refurbishment programme 2007 to 2011. But features such as the door or even the fireplace. Oh. These are original. On a cold winter's day, she'd be close to the fire.
Absolutely.
In fact, you can see her desk where she would sit, tending to government business, etc., backs onto the fire. We have a record that there's an entire department of the Queen's household and an entire department of the King's household, and their sole purpose was to keep the fires burning all winter long. Interestingly, on the outer halls, the less prestigious rooms, they burn just logs.
Oh.
But as you get further into the palace, the inner hall and the bedchamber, they burn both logs and coal.
And coal.
A reflection of wealth. And this is the room where the Queen will grant you a private audience, but it's also where the Queen attends to government business. This is her working space, it's an office. And it's where she will dine privately. There is a theory the Queen would never have slept in the bed in her bedchamber. It is thought that perhaps the Queen would withdraw into a smaller closet where she had a bed to sleep of an evening.
Right.
I don't know if I'm convinced by that theory. It's certainly possible. In Tudor England, you often find that was the case. But I think if I've got this lovely fire and this lovely bed, this is where I'm sleeping, not in some wee closet.
I might disagree with you on that, only because I'm thinking, wouldn't you want something more cozy? You know, it's Scotland, it's cold. Maybe.
Possible, it's certainly
But you're
possible.
the expert.
Well, that's the theory. No, there are theories that the King and Queen would not have used their bedchambers. However, I have seen the King's closets at the castle, and I know that there's no heating in them. So I think the likelihood of the King of Scots leaving a warm, toasty room and retiring into a cold closet, perhaps slight.
Okay, I think you win. All right, where off to next?
Well, we're in the Queen's bedchamber.
Yes.
And next to the Queen's bedchamber, we have the King's bedchamber.
Oh.
And interestingly, the lock is on the Queen's side. But we can go through today.
I love those queens. Clever, clever, clever. King's bedchamber.
King's bedchamber. So essentially this is the most important room in the castle. But not just a king using this space. When the adult Mary, Queen of Scots, returned to Scotland from France in 1561, as an adult queen, she is the boss, so Mary used the King's bedchamber rather than the Queen's bedchamber.
Right.
This is the Queen.
Wow, and then you've got sort of I-5 there.
For her father, Jacobus V, James V. But perhaps the nicest original feature in here, the fireplace, with thistles down either side and lions also, emblems of the Scots monarchs.
Beautiful, absolutely stunning. This ceiling is exquisite.
It's beautiful.
Not original,
No,
but
well.
replica, so tell me.
Yeah, this is a replica of how this ceiling looked from the 1540s until the 1770s. Wow. Up here, we have a replica set of what were called the Stirling heads.
Okay.
The Stirling heads were wooden roundels commissioned by James V at the time of the palace construction. And they were in the ceiling of this room until the year 1777, by which time the military were here, and it's said that the weight of the roundel was causing the ceiling to collapse.
Okay.
One of the roundels fell, and the story goes, perhaps it's an apocryphal tale, that it hit a soldier in the head, and consequently the army decided they must be removed on grounds of health and safety. Some were destroyed at that time, some were burned, some were given away, but thankfully 34 of the original Stirling heads have survived.
No.
31 of them are here at Stirling Castle in a purpose-built gallery. The other 3 are at the Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh. And it's great that they have survived because they're some of the finest examples of Renaissance art ever produced in Scotland.
Incredible
Beautiful
that they
treasures.
survived.
They have survived. This is a replica set, but it's showing how the ceiling would have looked. And we can identify some of the heads. The lad up here with the beard, the bonnet, the golden sleeves.
Yeah.
We think that head may represent King James V himself.
Who built
he commissions the palace.
The palace.
And next to him, the lady in the purple dress.
Yes.
We think that's Mary of Guise.
Oh, his second
French
wife.
bride who lives here in the palace, bringing up Mary, Queen of Scots.
Yes.
And on the other side of the king, the lady with the red dress,
The first
Madeleine
wife.
de Valois, the first wife. So James has
Yes,
his
surrounded
queens on either side.
himself
But
by his wives.
My own personal favourite.
Oh,
Looking
yeah.
down upon the king's jester,
It's
giggling and
fantastic.
laughing.
That is fantastic.
But it is a beautiful ceiling, and it must have been stunning in the 16th century when our monarchs were using this space and their guests were gazing upon this grandeur.
Incredible. And this space was used.
King's Inner Hall, so essentially this is where the king is on public display. This is where he welcomes ambassadors to the court. This is
Okay.
where he discusses politics. This is where he will dine with courtiers.
Right.
So, yeah, King's Inner Hall.
With this absolutely extraordinary and exquisite ceiling.
Very much so. Very much so.
What a wonderful tour through the history of the Scottish monarchs who have left their mark on Stirling. But Ross had one last hidden secret of the castle's past to show me.
Now, this looks original.
It is indeed. It is indeed. This is an original roof beam from one of the floors in the structure in which we now stand, the Prince's Tower, which dates back to circa 1502, built for James IV.
And original nails.
That's it. You can still see them there.
Oh my gosh, you can. So what was this room then used for?
This room plays an important role in the history of Stirling Castle. For we know in the 1570s, this space here was the schoolroom of King James VI.
Right.
He was educated here at the castle in his childhood by a man called George Buchanan, who was something of a tyrant, albeit a very learned scholar.
Is this original?
Well-
I'm obsessed with something being original.
We have 3 fireplaces here. This is the original 16th century fireplace.
Okay.
So this would be the opening that warmed James VI when he was being educated here by George Buchanan.
Yes.
Then we have a 17th century fireplace, smaller, that was installed at a later date. And then we have a 19th century military fireplace.
Oh
But when
my
you strip all back
goodness.
through the layers of history, this is the one,
16th, 17th, 19th. Incredible. And up there?
And that's supporting the chimney.
Right.
In the
So
Prince's Tower.
16th.
16th century.
16th
aye.
century.
This structure is part of James IV's forework, the old outer wall of the castle, and it's built circa 1502. Wow. But no, this has been an important room. James VI famously is educated at Stirling Castle. He spends his first 13 years here. And in this space he's educated by Buchanan and Peter Young. And Buchanan pushed the young king hard. It was his contention that a king should be the most learned person in the realm. And therefore we know that the curriculum was tough for the king. He got out of his bed in the morning, first thing he had to do was his Greek studies.
Wow.
Then he got his breakfast. After breakfast, he was studying Latin.
Of course he was.
After Latin, it's lunch. And in the afternoon, it could be a different subject, history, rhetoric, poetry, something like
Right.
that. But it did inculcate in the king a genuine love of learning. In fact, when James VI visited Cambridge, the university, in 1605, once he was King of England, he did express the sentiment that had he not been a king, he would have liked to have been a university don. And
He wanted to be a don.
he wanted to be a don. Easily one of the most learned sovereigns ever to have sat upon a British throne. And it's possible, just possible, that the king has left his mark in this room. Come this way.
Okay.
In here, we have a cupboard. On either side, we have plaster,
Yes.
which is original 16th century.
So this is original 16th
This is
century.
original. And in 2007, we had an archaeologist working in this space, taking all the plaster off the walls, trying to investigate the
His
space,
schoolroom.
how it's put together,
Yeah.
what can we learn about it. And he notices the sections of plaster on either side, and he also sees that upon it, there's etchings. So he investigates further, and it's graffiti.
No.
Now you're seeing it on both sides, but the most legible sentence written, I don't know if you'll manage to make it out, but if you can see here it says G-O-D,
Yeah. Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
M-A-D-E, God made, and it continues, God made man and woman,
Wow.
and underneath it, J-A-M-E-S,
No.
James, and below that, the bottom loop of the number 6.
6.
God made man and woman, James 6. So we can't say with certainty that it was James VI himself who inscribed this upon the wall, but there's a good chance that it was. Yeah. And you can see it's just at the right height for a wee schoolboy.
Exactly.
To be scratching
That's
up on the wall.
That's exactly right. He'd be yay high.
It'd be wonderful to think that the king has left his mark on his schoolroom here at Stirling Castle.
I think you should put some glass over that.
I think we should. We want it to be there for a long, long time to come.
That's exactly right.
It's a treasure.
What unbelievable. What an unbelievable treasure to see right now. Thank you, Ross.
You're welcome.
Wow. Incredible. What an amazing day out here at Stirling Castle. And it was really wonderful to see how this fortress transformed into a royal palace. I mean, once the king felt sort of less threatened, he decided to show off his power and spend it on building and enlarging and creating chapels and royal apartments. And of course, for me to be able to walk in the footsteps of Mary, Queen of Scots as well, and to touch the door that I know that she definitely laid a hand on was really, really thrilling and something I will forever remember. It has been a great visit at Stirling Castle. Bye, everybody.